So hello everyone. So we start our virtual series seminar. So please keep your camera active during the seminar. Just a reminder, financial assistance is available from the department for eligible students enrolled in the thesis programs. To continue receiving this support, students are required to present their project at least once at the seminar. Please look in your letter of understanding. This is stipulated there. So SIS offer awards for the winning student presentation. First place, $200. We also have special mentions and of course the seminar question award of $50. And to obtain this one, you have to ask minimum one question per seminar. Now for the new students as well as the returning students, just a reminder, it is student responsibility to check the McGill email regularly for any communication. Do not use your personal email when you write us, and please include your McGill ID number in the communication with us because it helps us a lot. Now for the new students in the thesis program, as you may know, you need a research advisory committee that it's made an advisory chairperson and a minimum 2 additional committee members. The chairperson, it is assigned by the department. So some of you already, and especially as a PhD student, you already receive a letter from Sharon and partially some of the master students. If by next week, by the end of next week, everybody, so all the new students, master, PhD, did not receive this letter, please inform us as soon as possible. Selection of a minimum 2 additional committee members and arrangement required to convene the meetings are responsibility of you and your supervisor. So our responsibility is just to assign your chairperson. The rest, it is your responsibility. So as this is master or PhD student, you have to achieve several milestones. So one of them, it's the first meeting, but must be done within 3 months from the beginning of your program. So meaning by December, you should have your first RAC meeting that it will take place with your supervisor and your RAC chair. You don't need the other members. And after that, meet your full RAC committee for a minimum once a year until you graduate. Complete progress track forms for these meetings that are available on our website and upload the progress track form signed by all the members, including Dr. Moale, who is our GPD, on your progress and inform us immediately to operate in your file. Why? Because the GPS will send email reminders in your McGill email in case any of these milestones are not achieved. So 2 incomplete progress tracking forms could result in a failure. So please be careful and complete your milestones. Thank you. And now we'll let Dr. Moale to present our speaker.
Thank you very much, Laura. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Amanda Wheatley. So Amanda serves as the Liaison Librarian for Management, Business and Entrepreneurship at McGill Libraries, where she also leads outreach and engagement initiatives. In addition to these roles, Amanda has recently taken on the position of project manager for the redesign of the McGill Libraries website. Her research focuses on the fascinating intersection of artificial intelligence and user services in libraries. Amanda is particularly interested in understanding how AI tools influence and shape the information-seeking behaviors of library users. So we are fortunate to have her share her insights with us today. Please join me in welcoming Amanda Wheatley.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today. So today we're going to talk about AI tools for research. And I'm going to open up the chat, so please feel free to stop me at any point as we go if you have any questions or comments. You can also unmute yourself and participate as well. Normally I have my co-presenter Sandy here with me, and we're able to kind of tag team the chat together. So bear with me as I tried to do this alone today. So you already know a little bit about me. My colleague Sandy, who does all of this research with me, couldn't be here today. But between the two of us, we put together these presentations and we do all of our research on AI and information-seeking behavior at the library. So this is kind of our combined work. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the AI family tree. I'm going to talk about resources available to you. And then we're going to talk about how you can implement these in your projects and create a research plan. And we'll talk a little bit about an AI literacy framework. So the family tree. I think it's important that when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we sort of define what that is and how that fits into a framework or a family tree. Especially with generative AI being so popular right now, I think a lot of people assume generative AI is artificial intelligence and they kind of forget to take a step back and look at the entire network. So where do we start? Well, with artificial intelligence, it can be defined as the capacity of computers or other machines to exhibit or simulate intelligent behavior. So this is a very broad definition from the Oxford English Dictionary. But then if we look at the researcher definition, we can see that AI is flexible to changing environments and it learns from experience. So you'll get a lot of different definitions of artificial intelligence out there. There's not really any one agreed upon definition from researchers in the field. It tends to change case to case, which is why we like to have a couple different definitions up here to start with. But then there's other terms in addition to artificial intelligence that we need to be aware of, like machine learning, for instance, which is a subset of AI used to teach computers how to learn and act without being explicitly programmed. So some people consider machine learning to be its own field. Some people consider it to be a subset of AI. In my instance, you are neither right nor wrong. It can exist in either space, but other people might have other opinions on that. But within machine learning is something called deep learning, and this approach avoids the need for human operators to formally specify all the knowledge the computer needs. The hierarchy of concepts enables the computer to learn complicated concepts by building them out of simpler ones. So if we think about all of the information that we're able to input at any one time in our brains and then make decisions about logically, a computer is able to replicate this process and do it far more on a far more expansive scale than we would ever be able to comprehend just based off of the processes of machine learning and deep learning. And then generative AI, where does this fit into all of this? So generative AI is a subset of machine learning as well. It's trained off of a massive data set. So in the case of ChatGPT, it was 45 terabytes worth of data, which is completely insane if you think about how much like your phone might have 100 gigabytes on it, maybe 250 gigabytes on it. So you think about 45 terabytes worth of data is absolutely massive. So generative AI generates new content. So this can be text, images, music, art, code, and it requires a lot of resources to build. And then within generative AI, we also talk a lot about large language models. So large language models are those training data, those massive amounts of training data used to teach an algorithm without the need for explicit instructions from a human. LLMs are used to build context and relationships between words and phrases that make AI capable of predicting and responding to prompts. So that's why when we look at tools like ChatGPT or Copilot, we're seeing a lot of predictive text. So it's not necessarily like a search engine the way that we're used to seeing AI information layers. It's more of generating and predicting what text would be most logical to come in the next sequence of events. And how does all of this fit together? So this is our AI family tree. So if we look at artificial intelligence as getting DNA from machine learning, from data science, and then further up, we would see statistics and computer science as well. You can see all of these different outputs. And where we really find generative AI for the most part is within machine learning and then within natural language processing, speech and vision. Generative AI is kind of taking the place of, or becoming a product of all of these different types of AI tools. So let's have a little discussion right here. So what are some AI tools that you use? You can feel free to throw these in the chat or unmute yourself if you'd like. But let's just talk about what are some tools out there that you use. ChatGPT. I also use ChatGPT. Consensus, Perplexity. Lots of ChatGPT. Does anyone use the Microsoft Copilot? Oh yeah, I see there's a Copilot in the chat now that we have access to it through McGill. Oh, Sourcely. I haven't heard of Sourcely before. I'm gonna have to check that out after. That's really cool. Perplexity, lots of Perplexity as well. Awesome. So if we're looking at tools already in use, I kind of want to switch our discussion question here to kind of seeing if we've ever used AI to augment your research process. So looks like a lot of people are using AI tools, but do you use it for research? And if so, maybe how are you using it? And like I said, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to talk too. So someone is using it to find relevant articles. Others are using it to help with code. Using it to check grammar and understand concepts that you don't understand, writing code in R, coming up with titles. I love that, coming up with titles. I do that with ChatGPT sometimes when I'm not feeling particularly creative and I need a helping hand. So helping with code for Excel spreadsheets, for sure. My boss recently, he used it to write a Python script so that we could take all of our collections data and put it directly into an Excel sheet, which has helped a lot of us librarians plan a lot better. So I have to say that was a really cool use. Awesome. So we've got a lot of really great uses here for different tools in the research process. So what we're going to go over in this next section is just some of the tools that you can use. And I already saw some things like Elicit and Consensus in the chat. So we're going to talk about those today as well as others. And then as we get through the presentation, we're also going to talk about how you can actually incorporate that into your research plan or into a data management plan. So I like to start this section off with a very classic library question. I am looking for a book. I don't remember what it was called, but the cover was red. Can you help me? So this is something that we get a lot in library land, where people just don't have any recollection of what it is they were reading, and they need help trying to put that together. In fact, I once spent a whole Sunday working with a student who had forgot to take down all of their citations, and we had to recreate their bibliography from scratch just based off of the quotes that they were using in their paper. So it happens quite a lot in different contexts. But this is a kind of classic question that we get all the time. And what I want to do is break this question down so we can figure out how artificial intelligence might come into play with something like this. So common questions are kind of broken down into three categories. So you have text-based or oral questions. So these are questions which we can break into searchable terms. And then we have world knowledge questions. So which part of the questions have obvious answers? And then unanswerable questions, and which part of these questions cannot be answered. So when we're dealing with something like the cover was red, there's not really searchable terms that we can have here unless there's a database that looks up books based off of the color of their covers, which I can confirm is not something that we have as of yet. But we do have some really interesting book searching databases, especially on the library end of things. World knowledge questions. So there's no part of this question that has an obvious answer. So it's not really something that we can go in and put into a search engine and pull out something direct, which means there's a lot of back and forth that's needed. And until this kind of wave of generative AI, we didn't really have a way of doing that with traditional searches. What we needed was something a little bit more semantic. Something that gets us away from Boolean operators. So traditional literature review searching uses structure and Boolean logic to retrieve relevant results. But what we're seeing right now are these semantic layers. So this is where we're able to get away from the text-based searchable terms. And we're able to kind of bring in more colloquialisms. We're able to be more semantic in our search. And that's kind of getting us away from having to have all that structure and finding things in new ways. So what I'm going to show are some different tools out there that use semantic searching, starting with Semantic Scholar. So if you haven't heard of Semantic Scholar before, this was started by the Allen Institute. The idea here is that it's kind of almost like a direct competitor for Google Scholar, but it's pulling in abstracts, it's pulling in figures and tables and data, as well as citations into the search feed. And so it gets you a little bit more of a comprehensive picture rather than just having the title and a link to the article. So I'm going to take a look at Semantic Scholar for a second here. And for today's purposes, just because we have a large group, I will put in a term that we use a lot here, which is information literacy and academic library. So you can see we have 41,600 results. So not quite as robust as something that you would get in Google Scholar. You might get like 200,000 results in Google Scholar. So it's not searching the same amount of content, but it is searching quite a lot. And sometimes having fewer results is actually better. But what's really great about this is that we get a summary. So in this case, a too long didn't read, which is a new tag. It wasn't doing that about a month or two ago. So that's always interesting to see that show up. But normally what you're getting is the abstract. If there are any tables or figures, it will pull those out too. We can see all of the citations and references directly in the search result. And in this case, this is an open paper, so we can go directly to the PDF. And on the right-hand side, we also have this AI-powered Ask This Paper tool, which allows us to get different summaries and questions answered. If we want to know more about the results or the methodology, we can directly ask the tool here, and it will pull those out for us. And this is also a relatively new feature for Semantic Scholar within the last few months as well. So it's one that I've been testing out. But where Semantic Scholar really shines is when you create a free account. Semantic Scholar is totally free to use. You can actually build collections based off of what you're searching, and then it'll start to recommend you content based off of your collection. And it's going to allow you to build a library that way, which is really neat, that you're able to kind of customize your experience. Now with Semantic Scholar, the main thing that I like to point out is what's going into the back end. So if we go to the home page, underneath About, there's a tab for publishers. And this is all of the publishing partners. So this is all of the content that's getting fed into the search algorithm here. So you can see that Archive is on here, BMJ Journals, Cambridge University Press, IEEE, De Gruyter. We've got PubMed is being filtered into here as well. Springer Nature, Wiley. The biggest one missing is Elsevier. So you're not getting any Elsevier content in here, which is unfortunate, but it's the way that it goes. Elsevier has their own AI layers, and they're a little bit proprietary about what they do. So they want people going into their systems, not having to go into systems like this. But it's really great because we can see exactly what's going into these tools. And the reason that I like to start with Semantic Scholar is that a lot of the AI resources out there use Semantic Scholar as a back end. So when you're searching other AI tools, other literature review tools, you're really just searching Semantic Scholar. So I'm going to start with a couple of those other tools, starting with Research Rabbit. I like to kind of start completely free and move my way up to tiered models. So Semantic Scholar is completely free. Research Rabbit has free versions of it that work really, really well. You can also donate to them. But in the free collection, I'm logged in. So I'm just going to start a new collection here to show you kind of how this works. So essentially, you're building a folder. Call this test 4. I should probably clean up all my test files. Test 4, and let's go ahead and start and kind of see how this works here. So with Research Rabbit, you're getting a visual layout of all of your papers, and we need to start with a seed paper. So we can do that if you already have the title or the DOI of a paper that you're currently working with, you can plug those in. You can actually import your Zotero library. So if you're a Zotero user, you can directly connect your account, which is really quite helpful. It does not work the same with EndNote. You actually have to upload the RIS file if you want to use EndNote and Research Rabbit together. But in this case, I can also search by keyword. So I'm going to do my same search for information literacy and hit search. And so you can actually see right here in gray, results powered by Semantic Scholar. So it's being really transparent about where this information is coming from. And it's also toggled to all subject areas. You can also change that to biomedical and life sciences. And this is where you'll get results powered by PubMed explicitly. Doesn't want to load. That's all right. We'll just go back to Semantic Scholar because we've got some options here. And then what we want to do is once we find papers that work for us, we're going to add these to our collection. So I'm just going to add the first couple here, even though that's probably a little bit too random. But that's all right. So I'm going to add the first 4 here. And then what it's going to do, and this is kind of the claim to fame for Research Rabbit, is that it's going to create these similar work catalogs for you. And they like to kind of brand themselves as the Spotify of academic research, and that they're creating these curated collections for you based off of what you're searching. So the more papers that you put into your initial collection, the more specific the results are going to be based off of what you're already searching. So when I click on similar work, I'm getting 720 suggestions based off of the 4 articles that are already in my collection. If I wanted to see results based off of just one of these, I could turn on just one result rather than all 4. And now I'm seeing these generated works, but I'm also seeing a network of how these authors are connected to each other. So I can explore the authors if I wanted to. I could see suggested authors. I can also export all of this into a BibTeX, RIS, or CSV file, which is very handy if you wanted to pull out an entire collection and then integrate it directly with EndNote. Or maybe you're using Mendeley, and as I mentioned earlier, Zotero, you can automatically connect your library, so you'd be able to export directly to Zotero if you have that setting turned on. And then from here, the kind of visual layout just continues to expand. So if we were to just click on this next paper, we would get a abstract and some basic information. There's no PDF available. So in this case, it isn't an open work or it isn't an archived work. So we would have to go to our handy library, the McGill library, and search for that title and pull it up. Or if we didn't have it, you could submit an interlibrary loan request. And I see there's a question, can you also view the quality of the paper such as the impact factor? No, so the impact factor is not in these results. So that's something where you're getting a little bit less of a service with these. So traditionally you would see impact factor in some of the library databases because we're paying for a much more robust system. With these free systems, you don't always get that type of search function or filter or metadata related to the article. So it's kind of just a like a kind of a what you're willing to give up by playing with these tools essentially is certain functionality like that. And then we can, and as we go through our papers and we see ones that are relevant to our collection, we can add them back to our folder. We can add them to other folders. And the more that we do that, if I scroll back here to our original folder, so previously we had 720 similar works. Now we have 913 based off of the paper that I've added in, because it's now trying to reconfigure itself and say, okay, we've added 5 papers now. What do these 5 papers have in common? What else do you want to see based off of these papers? And it's going to keep trying to come up with that for you based off of what you put into that initial collection. So every time that you add a new article, your suggested results are going to be a little bit different. And that's kind of the core of Research Rabbit. I don't know if anyone has any other questions about how this works. Otherwise, I can move on to the next example. But it's really much more of a visual way of tracking your papers. Okay. So the next example I have to show is Elicit, and I saw from the chat that a few people are already using this, which is great. So Elicit is, they have a free version that you can use, but the free version is a little bit limited. You can't actually export all of the papers. You have to pay in order to do that. And I just see that there's a question, can we export the list of papers to another platform? So it depends what you mean by platform. So you can export to a CSV file or an RIS or a BibTeX file. So you'd be able to import them into like a reference manager. So if you're using Zotero, Mendeley, EndNote, RefWorks even, you can export them that way, but you couldn't bring them into like another database if that's what you're referring to. Great. So as I was saying with Elicit, this is where we're getting into more of those premium kind of features. So if you want the more advanced functionality, you're going to have to shell out some money for that. Now we can do the exact same search here with our keywords. So we can ask our research questions. So you can be really semantic when you do this. You don't have to be very structured at all. We can also extract data from existing PDFs. So I'm actually just gonna go back to our search here. Oh. And grab a PDF. Oh, and of course, I'm off campus today. So I don't have my VPN on, which is why this isn't popping up with my PDF as it normally would. Let me just grab one here that has a PDF already attached. So I'm going to download this, and into Elicit, I can now extract data from my paper. It's just going to take a second to upload. And then finish. All right. So in this case, no title found. So it's possible that the way that the metadata on the PDF was set up, that it's just not able to pull in that information. But that's all right. We can usually edit that ourselves as we go. But if I click on this file, takes a second to load. Oh, it actually put all of the full text into the file. That's interesting. I haven't had to do this before. That's all right. So put the entire full text into the paper here. I'm going to go back to the previous one that I had uploaded. Oh, it's also putting in. Oh, you know what I think happened? I think I've reached my tokens for the month here, so I can't actually show the feature that I wanted to show. This is my bad for doing this. But essentially what would happen is once you upload the paper, if you have the space on your free version, you would be allowed to then select different things like toggle on all the methodology, toggle on the results, and it's going to extract that information for you. And you can build yourself a dashboard essentially based off the paper that you've uploaded. But I'll go back to the beginning here and I'll show you our search here for information literacy, so you can kind of see what these dashboards look like. So here we have the recommended articles. We have the abstract summary. So this is really important, is that the summaries that they're creating are based on the abstracts themselves. They're not based off of the full text. So whether or not you want to trust something like that is kind of up to you. In my opinion, the actual abstract would be a little bit more useful than a summary of the abstract. So what you could do instead is turn on different columns like summary, main findings, even if you wanted like outcome measured or something like that. And that would allow you to see a little bit more from these papers. Now, you usually get about 1 or 2 of these on the free version. So I'll put in main findings. So you can see in this case, not mentioned, the abstract does not present scientific or specific research findings or conclusions. So in this case, because it's only searching the abstract and not the full text, you're not actually getting all of that functionality that you would be if you had just read the abstract yourself. So you can see that even though there is all this functionality, even though there are all these fancy toggles, it's not always better than if you were searching in like a traditional library database. So there's kind of a payoff to these tools, or kind of like a line of how useful they are to you. In this case, yeah, I have to go down a little bit before I can find one where it was probably an open paper, so they were able to extract that information. So it really depends on whether or not the paper was open access. And I see a question here, can Research Rabbit integrate with other tools like EndNote? So it doesn't have a direct integration with EndNote. So Zotero is actually open, which allows a lot of people to create these types of partnerships or integrations, whereas EndNote is very much closed down. It's proprietary. So you have to negotiate with them in order to have these integrations, which is why we don't get them as often, especially with free tools. So we're likely not going to see anything with EndNote directly into a lot of these tools, just because they're so locked down that way. And you'll also notice that, as I mentioned earlier, you can't export without being on the premium plan here for Elicit. So you do have to pay in order to export your results. So I recently did a study actually where I compared all of these tools. And so I had to manually pull out all of the titles and authors and DOIs, which was not a lot of fun. It took a lot of time. So if you are dealing with the free version, just know that you might have to kind of go one by one and track all of these. Otherwise, you might consider paying for the upgrade. But it's really more of just kind of a useful kind of first glimpse at what research is out there. Any questions about Elicit while I'm here? Okay. And again, if you do have any questions, like I said, at any time, feel free to pop those in the chat or unmute yourself. So I'm not going to go too in-depth with these next two, but I also wanted to point out SciSpace and Connected Papers. So these are 2 additional tools that you can use to augment your literature review process. So SciSpace, very similar to Elicit in that you're going to search for your papers, and then you can also do this chat with a PDF where you upload your PDF and you're going to get those same similar summaries and things like that. And then if you do get certain premium subscriptions, you can also take advantage of other tools like their generative AI writer. They also have tools that can extract data, find concepts, paraphraser, citation generator. So all these different tools that are available once you get onto more of the premium plans. But in terms of looking for papers, we can ask it a question. You can type in your keywords. You can just be really kind of relaxed with this. So I'm just going to do information literacy again. We'll give that a second to load. Okay, apparently the results don't want to come up today. That's fine. But what you're going to see is something very similar to Elicit with SciSpace, where you're getting that summary generation at the top, where you're getting your list of results, your potential papers, top papers for your question. And then you're going to get that extracted summary based off of the abstract. And again, that's the really important thing to remember, is that these summaries more often than not are coming from the abstract itself, not the full text of the paper. And that's really the key thing to remember, is that you're dealing with that. And so whether or not you're using these tools for the summaries, this can kind of tell you that maybe another tool would be more useful to you, or other functionality of that tool would be more important rather than the results themselves. And I see a comment, maybe it's because of the VPN. It shouldn't be the VPN for this specific tool, just because this isn't a library database. So I should just be able to access this for free, but as we can see, something went wrong. So I'm going to leave that there, but it would look very similar to Elicit in the type of layout that you're getting. I know that a lot of students like to use Elicit or SciSpace because of the ability to upload a PDF. And that's where I kind of want to turn this conversation, and I'll go back to Elicit for this, into their help center, because this is where they have all of their information about the back end, but also about their terms of service. So if you scroll down here, we have our terms of service and our privacy policy. So I always recommend, whenever there's a tool where you can upload a PDF to get responses, you always check out the terms of service and the privacy policy first, because there are some of these tools where they actually claim intellectual property ownership over whatever PDFs you upload. So if you're uploading your own work or a PDF from another journal, you could be assigning over copyright without any legal kind of ability to do so to these tools. Now, Elicit, if you go into their terms of service, they actually don't claim copyright ownership over any of the content that you upload. They encrypt all of the PDFs that are uploaded, so you're the only one who's getting the results based off of that. It doesn't get fed back into their system. So that's really cool that they do that. And so you can check out their terms of service, their privacy policy, and you can also check out in their help center, they offer a lot of transparency about how that process works. And same with SciSpace, I've gone through their terms of service as well. And they don't claim ownership. But some of those other free tools out there, they do. So it's really important that you check that before you use all of them. All right, so that is kind of the, I'll say the literature searching space. I do want to show kind of what happens when you compare all of these tools. So we did a study that looked at connected papers, Elicit, Google Scholar, Research Rabbit, SciSpace, Semantic Scholar, and then added a traditional library database called Lista into the mix. And we pulled the first 50 results and completed a direct comparison of the articles. So in this instance, for unique citations, so citations that could only be found in that platform, we saw that the most unique citations actually came from the library database itself. And then Elicit, Google Scholar, and SciSpace actually had a lot of unique citations, but where we didn't see a lot was in Semantic Scholar, Research Rabbit, and Connected Papers. And that's because all of these tools use Semantic Scholar as their back end. And this is where I recommend that if you're going to search in these tools, that you kind of create a combination. So you're not just searching one, like you wouldn't just search Elicit. You might compare Elicit to Semantic Scholar. You might compare Elicit to SciSpace, or something like that. And that way you're getting a more broad picture of what is out there. And don't forget those traditional library databases too. And then we looked at formats. So we found that journal articles were the most prominent type of format, but these tools like SciSpace and Elicit also offered book chapters. They also offered conference proceedings. Some of them even did theses. So there were a little bit of a mix in there, whereas some sources like Research Rabbit and Connected Papers, we only found journal articles in them. So depending on what you're looking for, you might see some of these different tools be of use to you. And then we looked at the yearly coverage from these tools. So our library database Lista only recommended articles from 2023 and 2024 versus these other tools where we were scattered throughout the years. So Semantic Scholar was pretty recent. I think they had a couple articles in 2023 and they stayed mostly within the last decade. But then Connected Papers went all the way back to 1990, which was really interesting to see. Same with Semantic Scholar and Google Scholar. So you can see that the range is really quite over the place. So if you're looking for the most current content, you're not always able to do that in these spaces. So I do want to take a minute to talk about the ChatGPT in the room, because I know a lot of people use this. So ChatGPT, depending on which version you're using, you may get links or suggested links to the articles that you're searching for. If you are using the free version, so version 3.5, you don't always have those links. Sometimes you can ask for them. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. I find a lot of the times when I ask for them for research articles, I get sent to a 404 error page. So one thing that you can do is add in a browser extension like WebChat and then you can add in specific site searches. So you could ask it to search only Google Scholar. You could ask it to search PubMed directly. So you have a little bit more control over the type of search that you're getting, and you're going to get results from these specific search engines. So one way to kind of up your ChatGPT game is by having these direct searches put in with a web extension. So other resources that I want to talk about are in the back end of the systems that we're already using. So TrendMD is an article discovery platform that shows you related articles. So if you're ever in a traditional library database and you see that similar articles or related articles section on the side, oftentimes that's powered by the company TrendMD. And what's really interesting about them is that they are really transparent about this, that they have manual control over the AI filter. So oftentimes it's based off of impact factor. It's based off of kind of connected search based on the full text. It's trying to pull out as much comparison as possible. But what they're able to do as a company is go in and say, okay, these same articles keep showing up. It's not showing other articles by other authors who should also be included in these searches. So they're able to go in and kind of manually fix that. So it's something that we don't know is happening. So like you as a user, you're not aware that that's being changed on you. So it's kind of something to just note that so when you're using the related articles function, even in a traditional library database, there is a little bit of manual input behind some of those. I also want to talk about similarity check and cross-ref. So if you've ever submitted a paper to a journal before, you might know about this. But if you haven't come across it yet, a lot of journals are now using a tool called similarity check to look for plagiarism. And so this allows them to kind of detect whether or not something was plagiarized. So it's their AI detection software, not to detect AI written content, sorry, but it's an AI powered detection software tool. So it's looking for just naturally plagiarized content, although probably they are looking for ways to pick up on AI generated work now. But what's happening with a lot of these journals is that they're using similarity check to do desk acceptances and rejections on papers. And so you could be subject to automated decision making based off of something in similarity check. And this has happened before. I don't know if I still have it. Yeah, I still have the thread in here. So this thread here, this is linked. So when I send you the slides, you'll be able to follow it. But what happened in this particular instance is that a researcher got desk rejected from similarity check because their paper was showing too many similar phrases that they used in their methodology and that they used to describe their institution. And so I'm sure that you can imagine that there's only so many ways to describe your location, to describe your methodology, especially if you're using really common methodology. And they were rejected based off of that. And they didn't have there was no human assisted part of that process. So they didn't have anybody to go back to and kind of say, hey, this was wrong. Because they were being subject to automated decision making. So these are just some of the things that are happening with AI in the research space. So I'd like to open it back up to discussion and kind of say, are these some tools that you think you could see yourself using? Are they useful? Can you see them being harmful? I think we've looked at both the pros and the cons. So I'm just really curious to know where your stance is with some of these tools and the use of AI augmented research. Yeah, I see someone's got their hand raised. Feel free to unmute.
Hi there. Thank you, Miss Amanda, for the amazing presentation. So yeah, I mean, the tools that you just showed us seem to be quite useful. All of that being said, whenever I do research, I normally look at the traditional database itself directly. I mean, yeah, it might take some time to getting used to using these tools, and maybe yes, it does have some perks in maybe in saving time and to helpfully quickly make decisions to whether to exit the paper or not. My only worry is the example that you actually showed before, that the use of AI and actually in actually like helping us to actually do the research itself. So for example, like there was one situation that my colleague faced wherein he just used AI to improve the writing. And then in one of the journals, I think he told me it was the Royal College of Surgeons journal. They did not accept it because it said that a lot of AI was being used in the writing. And the thing is that he did publish a lot of papers before this in a lot of other journals, and this is the first time he faced this problem. So, in your opinion, how do you think we can just bypass this problem? Like, because because some people are quite afraid to actually publish paper, right? And especially when journals are saying that AI should not be used in writing.
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of journals have started doing is actually putting like a disclosure statement with the paper to kind of be able to say, yes, I did use AI for writing in this capacity. And then that way the journal editors can make a decision based off that statement, whether or not they'll further review the paper. Not every journal is doing this though, so that makes it really hard to tell. So my recommendation is to always check with the editors of that journal and say, hey, we're thinking of using this tool. This is the space that we want to use it in for this purpose. Is this acceptable by your journal standards? Would we still be able to submit? So always checking with them before you do that work is what's really important, because like I said, there are some journals who are starting to do this. I feel like it's going to become an industry standard, but right now it's still not there. So always checking with them ahead of time is the best way to do that, even before you use the process, because you don't want to waste all of your time. If every journal comes back and says no, then you've already done it and you can't go back. So always checking with them first is the best method.
May I ask another follow-up question, Mr.
Yeah, of
Amanda?
course.
So, yes, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, whatever you said is perfectly correct. My question is that can we use paraphrasing tools to help us, to change certain wordings? Because I tried using it and I didn't like it much, because a lot of the scientific terms that I want to use just changes into something like very, very standard, or just to improve the fluency, which I didn't like it much. So in overall, it basically turned like really good scientific writing to like standard kind of writing, which I didn't like at all. So do you suggest any paraphrasing tool that could actually still keep the scientific writing of quality in the paper?
Yeah, I know a lot of people use Grammarly for that. My personal favorite is Antidote, but you do have to have a subscription in order to use it. Antidote allows you to specify the exact kind of level of writing that you want to see. So there is the scientific categories.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of students use that, especially for research papers. So I've seen that have kind of a higher quality of use
Okay.
than some of these other tools. I'm trying to think of any other free ones. There's
I know Quillbot is super popular, but I don't like Quillbot.
yeah,
I don't like it at all.
Quillbot. There's there's another one. The name is escaping me right now, but it'll show you kind of sentence by sentence like what level of readership your sentence is at, and it'll let you kind of toggle between them. But I believe the goal of that one, and I'm so mad the name is escaping me, but the whole goal is to actually bring your writing down so it's at a more common kind of level,
Yeah.
so that the readership is a lot more varied.
Yeah.
So it's not really good for kind of trying to advance it up to a more scientific level.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Amanda.
Yeah, no problem. And I see that there's a couple comments here in the chat, but if anyone else would like to unmute or
Sure. Hi, Amanda. Yeah, wonderful talk. Very informative as usual. I was just wondering, so you mentioned the issue with the time limitation, right? Or how far back in history can AI go to search a topic, let's say for our research purposes? I think it was Samantha's colleagues went as far back as 1990 or so. So have you ever had issues where you're doing a search on AI and maybe you compared with at a PubMed to go more direct, like more hands-on, like background search? Have you noticed that you ever missed like a situation where it actually missed major content that could be used for a specific topic?
Yeah, definitely. So these tools are not really the be all end all of literature. So they're not pulling up everything. And like, as we mentioned, anything that's using Semantic Scholar is missing Elsevier, and Elsevier is one of the premier academic publishers. So you're going to miss all of that content when you're dealing with these tools, which is really unfortunate. The other thing is that you don't have control over that date range. So you're really getting more of an ideation of what's out there. So it's a really good starting point to kind of point yourself in the right direction of what is out there in terms of literature. What can I kind of connect with to start? What are the relationships between these authors, and kind of get that picture. But it's not something that I would wholly say you only use this. If you want that level of control, you would go into something directly like PubMed or another library database, so like an Ovid database or something like that, in order to get that precise control.
So more or less like a follow-up. So you should, to be a little bit more thorough, probably do a follow-up with other search engines, I guess.
Exactly. So it's a nice place to start, but it shouldn't be the only place you go to.
Perfect.
Thank you, Amanda, for that really wonderful presentation. I like the whole discussion on elicit. I've been using it for a lot of structured data, but what I found is absolutely excellent when you are dealing with structured data. Look, sample size, outcomes, meta-analysis, and things like that. Once it's really neat and structured, it's absolutely great. I get into trouble once I go qualitative or the data becomes a little bit complex. Then any alternative to solve that?
I'm trying to think. I don't know if I have an alternative recommendation for that. You're right, it's not as good with qualitative data pulling that kind of content out. It is definitely better at quantitative data.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. For any quantitative data, it's great. Once it's you have a lot of these studies, medical related studies, of science, their whole design is very nicely linear and well structured. I don't know, maybe that's how elicit was programmed. Absolutely great for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of these tools like Elicit and SciSpace, they're more geared towards the science and medical fields. Even like Site.ai, which I don't talk about here because they are completely or almost completely subscription based. A lot of those are really geared towards the sciences, and so they do better with quantitative data than they do with qualitative. I think the reason why we haven't seen a lot of really good qualitative like extraction kind of tools yet is just because that level of content is not on par. I think people are using tools like ChatGPT and Copilot and like Perplexity to try to get that kind of qualitative experience out of these things because of the generative AI component. So I don't know if we'll directly see that in these databases, just because it is so much easier to use it with quantitative data.
Thanks. I think you have some questions in the chat.
Yeah. See here. When we use these tools for literature review or using them for paraphrasing, should we report it when we publish in our paper? Absolutely, yes. So actually, I'm going to skip forward in my slides here to how we can do this. We have a template for you. So one of the things that we recommend is having a really clear declaration of how you're going to use these tools in your paper, either in the methods or the results section, sometimes in the discussion. Not all of them necessarily have to be used, like the paraphrasing. Some of those might just have to be declared to the journal itself, but depending on how heavily you use the tools and in what capacity, you definitely want to declare that in your method somehow. To just be upfront and transparent about how you're collecting your data. I mean, if you're just using something like Research Rabbit for some ideation, then you don't necessarily have to say that you used Research Rabbit. But if what you're using is really a part of the research project itself, if it's important to making sure that the research project is able to exist in some capacity, then you definitely need to report that. And then I see another question here. Are online or free plagiarism checker tools good and safe to use? Is there one you would recommend? So honestly, I would kind of stay away from a lot of those plagiarism tools, especially ones out there that are not that are kind of just like free to use, like the first kind of plagiarism checker thing that you might see off of Google. Just because in the privacy policies, in the terms and conditions, you're often signing away the copyright ownership of your work to these tools in order to check these things. So this is why I always recommend reading terms and conditions. I recommend reading privacy policies. Sometimes they're called content policies, just to make sure that you're not actually giving away that kind of work to these tools. Like for instance, ChatGPT, if you're asking it to write some content for you, in their content policy, one of the things that you give away is your prompt, and you get back ownership of the output. Whether or not that's fully legal, I think the courts are still trying to determine that. But as it is now, you are giving away your prompt. So whatever you put into your prompt is now property of OpenAI for the time being. So it's really important to understand that depending on the tool that you're using, you might be giving up some of your intellectual property in order to use it. So is there one that I would recommend? Not particularly, because I think they all have a little bit of their own downfall. But Crossref, the company Crossref seems to be the industry standard right now. So their products are probably, I don't want to say the most safe, but safe-ish to use, just because they're so widely used across academia. You're probably better off sticking with some of those. But yeah, if you take away anything from the session, it's to please read a privacy policy or a content policy. Those are really important.
Often overlooked.
Yes. There's a really good documentary called Terms and Conditions May Apply that kind of goes over the hidden world of what we're signing away just by using these tools. So I highly recommend that.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And are there any other questions? Any burning questions? So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, you can ask Amanda. And thank you everyone for coming to the seminar. And have a wonderful week. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye,
I'll be
thank you.
sending out slides, so you can
Perfect.
contact me through there.
Thank you.